Alrighty, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to a live stream. We are back again. It's been a little bit of a while since the last live stream, so I'm going to kind of go through my opening spiel again for anyone who's new here. If you're watching it live or you're watching it after effect, is that this is a form check video that we're doing for our Discord server, Positions of Power. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Arian. I'm a coach with the Strength Guys, and we're doing a collaboration with King of Lifts for an app called Positions of Power. And so we have our own Discord server. We answer questions. We also have like a King of Lift section where we go over our podcast and the live stream. In our fantasy league and everything else like that we have going on the King of Lift side. And then here we're going to be doing some live streams every now and then as far as form checks, RPE checks, those kinds of things. So if you're over on the YouTube live stream, all the links are down below in the description. So you can go and find the link to the Discord server and join. You can submit your videos for future form check videos. You can also check out the Position Power app if you want to look for programming. And also you have my information if you want to contact me. My email's there, my Instagram account's there. And also you can always check out the Strength Guys if you want one-on-one coaching rather than just like, program to go do off on your own. And then if you're also over on Twitch, I tried to throw the link down into the chat for Discord server, so you can check that there. And you can always look me up on Instagram, Coach Arian K. You can look us up, thestrengthguys.com, all that good stuff. All right, so if you're also on Instagram, just last thing is if you're following me on Instagram or King of Lifts on Instagram, you can always go to the link in our bio, and then we have the link to join the Discord server there. So if you forget about it and you don't join while you're watching this live stream, and afterwards you want to go check it and you forgot where to find it or what the link is, you just go to our Instagram bio, and on there will be the Position Power Discord server. So we'll get right into it. I'm going to switch over here to my computer view. I have our Discord server pull up right here. So again, you can just see we have different channels here for general information, King of the Lifts, programming questions, form checks, those kinds of things. And we're always looking to expand upon it. So if you have any ideas of different channels you want on there, you can come in here, talk with us in the general chat, and we'll throw things in there. So I have a little bit to catch up on. And what I did is I want to switch it up, because before I was just kind of going from people who submitted the earliest all the way down to the latest. And now I was like, okay, let's switch it up. And let's break it up by lifter, so we can just focus on one lifter and all their videos for all the different lifts, and then switch over to another lifter. And then with this way, if you are one of these lifters, so you can see your name right here on the list, then you can go and just skip ahead in the stream if you're watching it after the fact. So if you're going to be Connor, you don't have to watch 1 through 5 after the fact. You can just skip ahead in the video and go find your section. So this will help people out. So we're going to get started here, number 1 with Mike. So I'm going to scroll up and find his videos, and we'll start going through and breaking down what he has. So I'm going to go up to kind of where we had our last live stream, which was up here. So I believe we did all these for Mike. And then if we come down, let's see when Mike sent in another video. So right here, MM1981. So we'll get started with this one right here. We'll get started with the deadlift. This is a set of 4 right here. And we've gone over Mike's deadlift before and really focusing on his starting position. And from the very beginning, that first rep looked good. From there, what I remember watching is, again, it just comes down to, for a lot of people, is pulling that slack out of the bar and getting as much tension as possible, and then making sure in his case his arms are nice and long. So if we watch this again and we watch the setup and execution of the first rep, let's try and go right to where he's about to start pulling. So here you can see his elbows are locked out, arms are nice and long. Here it still looks like his arms are fairly long and elbows completely locked out. You can see how you have this bend in the bar. He's pulling the slack out of the bar, getting as much tension as possible. And then he initiates the pull. Hips go up a little bit, but not a big deal. So then what happens with the change is, now going into his second, third, and fourth rep, you can see here how he kind of yanks it a little bit more. So if we go back a little bit and just play it right here, let me go back a little bit more. Right there. So if we kind of slow this down a little bit, let me see if I can. So you can see how right there the arms extend a little bit. So what I'm looking at here again is just focusing on this arm and this elbow, since that one's clearer to see, and you can see how there'll be a little bit of a bend in it, and then as it goes to initiate the pull, the arm gets longer and strains out more. So if we just focus right here on this little crease of the inside of the elbow and how long the arm is here when the elbow is locked out, compared to when he goes to pull right there, it looks like he has a bent a little bit. So right here, again, it looks like a little bit bent. And then as we continue to go forward, then you can see how the arm straightened out and got longer. And then here it got even a little bit longer as well when the weight's kind of really pulling on the muscle. So then we go here into the third rep. And again, you can see here it's a little bend. And then there, elbow's locked out and arm is straight. And then when we go into the fourth rep, again, here a little bit of a bend. And then there it starts lengthening. And then there's like fully lengthened and fully slack pulled out here. And you can see how the weights are still on the ground. So this is how much slack the goal, you may not be able to get this in actuality, but because as you're actually pulling, the bar is going to bend some more and some of the weights on the end will still be touching, but that's kind of like what you want to be trying to go for. So let me switch over my camera view again over here. And let me see if I can kind of show people. One of the examples I try and show people is like if you had a rope, okay? And so what he has is the rope is kind of like loose like this, like his elbow. And then when he goes to pull, he's trying to like yank it and pull it like that. Versus trying to get the rope straight and everything taut and then pulling. So if you were, let's say you had a truck and you were pulling a boat, okay? You wouldn't want how you're tying to the boat and pulling it to be, loose, and then you just floor your car and you yank on it. What you want to be doing is you go up slowly with the truck first and get the rope nice and tight, and then you start building that momentum and pulling. So with some things in life, you may want to apply like a really quick explosive force. Like for example, if you want to kick a door down or run into it with your shoulders or like that, you would put really explosive force with your foot and hit the door real quick, instantaneous, max force, and try and kick the door down. Or if you were going to hit it with your shoulder, you kind of stand back and you run into it and hit it. But that's just because you want to hit a really quick maximum force to break the door down and then no more force. In this case, we want to be applying maximum force throughout the entire range of motion. We're not just trying to jerk the bar off the ground and then stop after an inch. So that becomes more like, again, some examples I've given before is if your car breaks down, you want to push your car, you get behind the car, you dig your feet into the ground, you dig your shoulder into the bumper or the trunk, whatever, and you start building momentum and you push it. You don't stand 10 feet away and just run into the car because you're going to give a lot of force into the car, like an instantaneous force, and potentially, dent the car, like, put a bump into the bumper or whatever like that, or break the light, whatever, but it's not going to actually move it. You need to be applying as much force as possible continuously for a long period of time to actually build the momentum to break the friction and get the car moving and then get it going down the road. And similar thing, like if you're doing a leg press, okay, so if you're sitting down in a leg press and it's in the little safety, you haven't pressed it up yet to get started with your set, okay, you are not going to have your feet off of the pad, okay? So let's say this is the leg press where you put your feet up against it and you push it. You're not going to have your feet away from the actual leg press and then slam it into it to get it started. What you do is you put both your feet onto the leg press, and then you have your back and your butt onto the bottom of the leg press, and you're wedged in there, you're sandwiched in there with pressure against there, and then you apply force and you move the leg press up, and then you move the little safety, and then you get started with your sets. So you're kind of wedging yourself in there with a leg press. Your shoulders are wedged into the back of the seat, and then your feet are digged into the actual foot block or plate, and then you're applying force and you're pushing it. So this is the same kind of thing you're trying to do here, but in this case, you don't have somewhere for your back to be. So you're trying to wedge yourself in by pushing into the ground with your feet and pulling with the bar and your hands to pull the slack out and maintaining your hips in place. And so that's how you want to think about the wedge. And you want to try and minimize any bend here in the elbow, any shortening of the arm. What you want to be doing is maximizing how long your arms are and raising your shoulder, your head, your upper back, trying to pull it towards the ceiling. So again, if we go back to this example here, okay, and now let's say this rope right here is Mike's back, and then right here where my fingers are his head and shoulders, okay? You don't want to be leaned over too much and the elbows bent, okay? So now you're changing your torso angle, and then you're having, some change in position by the arms just lengthening and the elbows locking out. He wants to try and pull this as much to the ceiling as possible. So he wants to get like the head, the shoulders, the back as high up towards the ceiling as possible, and get this as tight as possible and not be bent over. So it's a difficult concept to understand. It's a difficult concept to apply. And it's not like you're going to get it perfect the first time or every time. You have to just try and focus on over time doing more and more of trying to pull as much slack out of the bar, getting those lats tight. I sometimes think about turning my right hand clockwise out to the outside and my left hand counterclockwise out to the outside to get those lats tight and those shoulders pulled down, and then trying to pull the torso, the head, the shoulders, the back up towards the ceiling as much as possible to have the arms as long as possible and the elbows locked out. So that's just the really main thing Mike has to focus on here, especially like the first rep will look good. And then the second, third, and fourth, he started yanking on a little bit because maybe it was a little bit difficult. And so he's trying to make it faster off the ground by yanking it rather than focusing on trying to execute every rep the same. So that's going to help him in the long run is once he can get that slack pulled out on every rep and get as tight as possible, he's going to be more efficient. And it's going to make him, stronger in the long run, which is what we want. So now let's take a look at his bench press here. We'll go in reverse order of the lifts. So a couple things here with his bench. Again, similar to the deadlift, there's like some inconsistency in the reps where the first rep looked different than the other reps. In this case, one of the things you can see is how slow the descent speed is on the first rep. So here, really slow and controlled. And then afterwards, you can see how fast he goes down. Like he's getting more comfortable with his bar path and staying under control while descending. So if he likes the reps 2, 3, and 4 better as far as the descent speed and controlling and everything like that, well, when you go to competition, the competition is only going to be 1 rep. So then he may revert to the 1 rep that he does here, the first rep, where it's super slow and controlled. The downside is you're wasting a lot of time and energy. So you want to try and go down as fast as you can while maintaining control. So similar thing to the squat. You want to descend as fast as you can while maintaining control. So that means people have to focus on that while maintaining control part to see how fast or slow they can go, and it may change over time. So you may start out slower because you feel like you're not used to the movement and the position that you need to be in, and over time you may need to be going. You'll be able to go faster, where then you can save some more energy, do things a little bit quicker. In the squat, you get a little bit more of a stretch reflex. So here he has to try and see if he likes reps 2, 3, and 4 better, then trying to commit to that on the first rep as well, figuring out that bar path, that faster descent speed while maintaining control and not getting thrown out of position. And then the other thing here, it looks like on the first rep, he kind of cuts the lockout short and goes right into the second rep. So here he presses up and goes right down into the second rep. So if we try and see if we can maybe pause this towards the top. So right there, as soon as maybe he's locked it out, he starts going into the second rep. So a couple of issues here is, one, you want to avoid blending your reps. You want each rep to be individual and take time between reps to reset. So if you need to take a new breath of air, you take a new breath of air. If you need to reset like your leg drive, or you need to reset your bracing or anything like that, make sure you're squeezing the bar as hard as you can. You do that and then go down. You don't want to just start blending all your reps and going right into the next rep, because if you fall into a bad position, then you're going into your second rep now in a bad position, and it can continue to deteriorate in the third and fourth rep. Especially in these lower rep ranges, 1 up to, let's say, 5 reps, you should be able to take your time, whether it's a squat, bench press, or deadlift, to reset, take a new breath of air, brace, get the lats tight, everything like that, and then go. I understand if it's like a 6, 7, or 8 rep set, that sometimes it can just be a lot of time and a lot of breathing and wasting energy. And at that point, you may hold your breath and bang out like 2 or 3 reps and then reset, take a new breath, bang out 2 or 3 reps. So I understand that for high reps, but here for low reps, especially if you're getting ready for a competition, you want them to be separate. You should be able to tell when one rep ends and then when the other rep begins. So another example people give is like, you don't want to be like a shotgun just shooting out a bunch of reps or a bunch of bullets. You want to be like a sniper rifle where you take your time, you breathe, you aim, and you're accurate with your shot, and then you take time to reset, get another bullet in there, find your target again, and then shoot again. So you want it to be separate and distinct. You want to just be shooting out as many reps as possible because, hey, I have to do a bunch of reps or I have to get a bunch of volume in. The other thing too is he may be cutting the range of motion short by as soon as he kind of thinks maybe he's locked out, going right into the next rep. And so it could be either the lockout or it could be that he's sinking in the chest more. It's a little bit hard to tell with this rack in the way, but if you look at the range of motion, so if we go back here and take a range of motion, he's using a velocity tracking device with a string right here on the bar. And then this also tracks the range of motion. So he gets the stats here of his speed in meters per second, and here his range of motion in feet. So if we take a look at the first rep here, you can see it's 0.95. And then all the rest of them are more, 1.08, 1.05, and 1.10. So the last rep was the longest range of motion. So the first rep was the shortest and the last rep was the longest. So something he needs to look into here is, one, is he cutting his range of motion, his lockout short on the first rep, or is he tighter on the chest and not sinking as much on the first rep, and then he's sinking more and more as the set gets more difficult. So let's try and watch that again. Just look at the chest and see if we can see anything there. So that one looks about the same as far as the sinking. Same with that one. It's a little bit hard to tell, but it looks like they're all kind of sinking in the same amount. So it could just be a combination of, one, cutting the lockout short, and two, maybe there's some of his arch is going and it's harder to tell. So you could possibly, with a better quality video, look how close this bar is to the safety on each of the reps, or maybe be able to tell with a different angle how far it's sinking into the chest for each of the reps. So a couple of minor things there to, again, improve consistency from rep to rep, similar to the deadlift, and then look into whether he wants to be a really slow descender or fast descender and make that decision. Again, going back to consistency, and then just taking the time with the reps and making sure executing all the reps, full lockout, resetting your brace, your leg drive, your breath, everything like that. So let's go into the squat next. And from what I remember, the squat looked the best of the three as far as these sets are concerned. And you can see on the squat, he does take his time at the top to reset and everything like that before he goes into the next one. The only potential thing, it might be better if we had a shot from behind over here, is that because over here the plates and stuff are blocking, but you can see how the plates spin right there. So you can see how the plates are spinning forward, and then here the plates stop spinning, and then there it spins forward again. So this could potentially be that momentum of him kind of going forward as he's coming out of the hole. His torso and his body weight are going forward, and potentially the bar is rolling up his back, or with his hands he's rolling the bar. So maybe as he's going up, he's kind of like rolling his wrist that way, and he's going down, he's rolling his wrist back. So as I said, maybe behind the view we'd be able to see what's going on with the wrists and the elbows and what's going on with the bar position. So potentially the bar is moving, and initially that movement also rolls the plates. Eventually the plate, because the collar can move separate, or the sleeve can move separate of the bar, then the plates continue to roll with that momentum and the bar stays in place. But you can kind of see, especially I think on this third or fourth rep, how it goes a little bit more forward. Right there, it looks like maybe the bar went a little bit more forward. Same with that one. So with this, you can do a couple things. One, someone could try and video a direct side view. So you're like down the barrel of the bar and be able to see the bar path and see how much is going forward and where it's going forward. And the other thing is it can be a behind the person view to be able to see what's going on with the wrists, the elbows, and the bar if it's rolling up the back. So potentially the bar could be rolling up the back. Potentially it could just be the torso and the body weight going forward. And potentially it could be both. So with the bar rolling up the back or moving in the hands, is important to try and keep the hands like frozen in place. So you want to try and keep, gripping the bar as tight as possible, keeping the wrist locked and the elbows locked. So you don't want to be moving the wrist or the elbows at all during the movement. And then also focusing on pulling that bar down onto the back. So it's kind of like if you're going to do a pull up or a lat pull down, that motion of pulling that bar down or pulling yourself up to the bar, you are getting the shoulders pulled down and you're getting the lats tight. You're contracting the lats. That's why a lat pull down works the lats, because you are contracting and pulling those lats. So a similar thing here is not only you want to squeeze that bar as hard as possible to, contract all the muscles in your forearms and your hands and stuff, but then you also want to think about pulling the bar down onto your back a little bit to maintain the bar on the rear delts and contract the lats, and so you get more bracing inside on the torso or throughout the torso. So not only are you bracing with your abs, but also you want to be pulling down and bracing, contracting your lats to keep that torso rigid and be able to keep that bar in place and avoid it from rolling up. So if you're just hanging the bar loose, like you're not really grabbing it too hard and you're not really contracting your lats, and you get thrown out of place a little bit, then that bar can kind of roll up the back into a mid bar position. For some people, it rolls up onto their neck if they're a high bar squatter. So just something to be mindful of with the squat, and potentially video from different views to see if there's any other issues going on there. So I think that was the main videos from Mike. I don't think he submitted anything else. Yeah, so we'll go into Cindy now. So we'll go back up here, and Cindy sent some videos, I believe, on the YouTubes. So we'll go click on those. So we have this one focusing on keeping the knees out, slowing bench reps, and widening deadlift stance. So let's take a look at those. Let me pause this real quick and see if this loads a little bit, and let's go 1080p. Let's mute. All right, let's take a look at what we got. So really solid set there on squats. So if we kind of go back here and focus on the knees, you can see, like she said, she's trying to focus on keeping those knees out in line with the toes. And you can see how she's doing a good job here. So if you just kind of look at the bottom position here, we're just trying to look at, where the knee is and with this toe and kind of with this rack right here. So you can kind of see the half of the N, and you can see all the Z, and then a little bit coming in right there. So the knee's still coming a little bit, but nothing too drastic here on this higher rep set. And then if we just kind of go back again and look as far as like taking her time at the top, it's a higher rep set. So again, she goes a little bit quick for a few reps here and then resets here, takes a new breath, gets the lats tight and everything like that, and then goes into another rep and here resetting again. So this is fine on the higher rep sets. And you can see how here towards the end now, she's taking her time more between the reps to make sure everything is tight and set up. So here from the behind the view, we see, a good bar position here as far as being on top of the rear delts. And so this right here is kind of, again, where you want to be sitting, and then you want to be squeezing those hands, pulling that bar down to maintain that position. And so you can see how the bar is just sitting there in place, and you have to just be mindful as a low bar squatter for anyone to just try and keep those elbows in place or bias down to not have them shoot up. But again, here everything looks good. You can see a little bit of the knee cave. Again, not a big deal. It's not coming in a ton here. And the more reps that she can do, keeping these knees out as much as possible, then you're going to be able to get more comfortable in that position, get stronger in that position. And then with the heavier weights, be less likely to have them really cave in a lot. Like some people, it comes in a lot, like, almost like touching, and it really throws off your positioning and throws off the muscles you're trying to use. And here also in the bottom position, pretty symmetrical. So overall, really good on squat, taking the time, keeping the knees out, bracing when you need to after a few reps. So keep that up, Cindy. Let's take a look at the bench press. So solid bench press here. As far as the pauses, could be a little bit more consistent with the length of the pauses. Like that one was good. That one was a touch and go. Then that one was good. That one was good. So really it was the second one. That one was a little quick too towards the end. So like the second one, the last one were a little bit quick. So some people, want to commit to heavier weights, especially if they're doing like RPE training and doing all regular training, but then they kind of start, compromising a little bit on their technique or doing their competition standards. So when you are doing the bench, you want to be focusing on being consistent where the bar is motionless on the chest, and even biasing towards pausing longer in the chest, because you'd rather pause longer on the chest and then go in the competition. It feels easier rather than this, like the second rep and the last rep were like touch and go, and then you estimate a 1 rep max off of that. Not that Cindy's going to do it off of this high rep set, but if you were someone who was doing that, you estimate it off of a 3 rep max, something like that, where you did touch and go on 2 of the reps and pause on 1, and then the number is going to be off and you go to the competition. You're not going to have the strength for it, and the pauses are going to feel much longer. So you want to make sure that you're focusing on consistent pauses, bars motionless on your chest, and if anything, bias a little bit towards pausing longer. For my lifters, sometimes I even do 2 count pauses as like a power day or speed day, and sometimes even a little bit heavier, just to like really get the comfortability, practice, and everything like that of pausing on the chest for twice as long is kind of how I think about it as a competition pause, and being able to stay tight, keep the leg drive, keep the bar motionless, not letting it sink in, everything like that, and getting that practice so that for the competition, if they do feel like it's longer, because also in the competition, you have to listen to the command and react in time for the command. To the faster reaction time you have, the faster you can press off your chest, and so it can feel longer. Here, as far as the bottom position as well, let me go into the next rep. Bottom position is looking, pretty symmetrical. It looks like, this elbow is tucked in a little bit more, but it's not too bad. Everyone's not going to be perfect as far as where they're aligned on the bench. So people are shifted over to one side versus the other. Some people have the shoulder not tucked in as much. So this one looks like the shoulder is a little bit higher towards the ears. This shoulder looks like it's tucked in a little bit more. And then that's what probably causing, this elbow to tuck in a little bit more. This one's flared out a little bit more. Some people have like their wrist one bend back more than the other one. And sometimes people have their feet, either one more forward than the other one or more wider out than the other one. So there's little small deviations in position and from left to right that can happen. And so you just want to avoid being anything too extreme, like the bar is shifted over a lot, and then avoid also it getting worse over time. So if it's staying like this, or if it's slightly improving, like for my lifters, I wouldn't care too much that maybe the bar is a little bit slanted or a little bit uneven. But if this was something major where the elbow is like really tucked down, this one's really flared out, where it could be potential issues on the shoulder, and like the feet were really off, then I focus on working on that with my lifters. So if it's like the hips and stuff, we try to focus sometimes on loosening up the hip flexors or the glute medius. And for the shoulder, sometimes we focus right on that kind of pec tie-in into the shoulder, and seeing if we can make them a little bit more symmetrical that way. But overall, good set right there. Let's take a look from this angle. So things look pretty solid from this angle too. So it looks like this wrist is bent a little bit more, but again, not too big of a deal here. And so then this side of the bar is a little bit lower, so it's like tilted down a little bit. And then it's hard to tell from here, maybe a side view, as far as one foot being further back than the other one. So a little bit of asymmetries here, but overall really solid benching, good positioning, and just focusing on consistent pauses, biasing towards longer pauses rather than touch and go. So let's take a look at the deadlift. Oh, that was a pretty quick deadlift. Let's watch it again. So pretty solid starting position right here. You know, the lower back going into the mid back is pretty neutral here. And then a little bit of rounding here of the upper back, which is fine. And then the head and neck kind of crank back. It just depends on the lifter. Some people are like this and never have any issues with it. Some people may feel like some soreness or pain or whatever in the neck, and they may have to look more down and more of a neutral head position. I tend to have my head down a little bit more on conventional and maybe a little bit higher on sumo. Here, a good job of having the shoulders, you know, relaxed and rounded forward so that the arms can be nice and long. Elbows are locked out. Hips come up a little bit. Same thing on this one, it looks like. So there you can see how the hips come up a little bit. So you may have to just focus here to make sure the bar is over the middle of the foot. So I kind of show like the middle of the foot here and not having it start over the toes. Because then if you have the bar starting over the toes and you're bending the knees and pushing the shins forward, then what can happen is you get the bar kind of shift back. So instead of having this vertical bar path, you're going to have a little bit of horizontal movement and then go up kind of like an L, or sometimes it looks like, you know, a J or whatever you want to think about it. And so right there, if I go back here, if that's too far forward, then you may have to focus on starting a little bit further back. So again, here, you have to see where this bar is, if it's more over the toes here or more over the straps. And if it's over these toes here, then it's what is happening is it's moving horizontally back towards these straps and then coming up. If it is over the straps, then it's just about getting as tight as possible here and getting as much slack pull out of the bar so that your body can use the glutes and the hamstrings to hold the hip down in position. So they're going to pull and hold that hip down position as the quads are trying to work. So if you don't have the strength for it, you know, if it's too hard of a set or like that, then it's going to kind of shoot up a little bit and lengthen the hamstrings. So then the lengthened hamstrings, once they can't lengthen anymore, will like naturally hold it down in position. So here, she's kind of shifting over to this position. So potentially something to look into is, okay, look at where the bar is. Some things lifters can do. I'm trying to see your setup here. So something people can use is use a line here on the floor, or if whatever your gym you have, if you have any kind of markers. And so what you can do is turn the bar and the weights and everything around so that you're deadlifting here on the crack. So then you can see where your foot is on the crack on that line, and then you can set up the bar and the weights to be right over that line. Or you can try and mark it. So if you had like chalk or something like that, you can make a little mark here and then have the bar be directly over that chalk mark, and then try and set your foot where the middle of your foot is directly over that chalk mark, so that then you know the bar and your foot are aligned properly, and then do your setup. Do not move the bar at all when you're doing your setup, and see if the same issue happens. If it doesn't, then, you know, maybe you were starting too far forward. If it does, then you have to just continue to focus on, you know, strengthening the starting position, pulling the slack out of the bar, getting as tight as possible, keeping those hips down, and fighting the weight trying to pull you out of position there. So let's go back here. See what else Cindy has. Slowed down bench this week. Don't think I'm deadlifting optimally. 7 weeks out from the Arnold. So let's take a look at this one as well. See if we see anything different than what we saw in the previous videos. Here again, the squats look really solid as far as taking the time at the top, keeping the elbows in place. Depth look good. Knees just coming in a little bit, not a big deal. Nobody's perfect with their squat form. So this is all really solid as far as the squats. So nothing too major here to work on. It's just continue to focus on the same things. So here for the bench, as far as a different angle, something to just be mindful of, it happens to a lot of lifters here. It looks like this left heel is up. This one, it could just be because it's like the shadows, but it looks like this one is down. So it looks like this one's fine, but this one looks like the heel is up. So potentially the chief referee and the referee here on the left side could, not give a start command. So a lot of lifters will have this tendency, like they're digging their feet back so far, and then they're not really driving, their feet down into the ground and getting good leg drive. So they kind of like, relax a little bit and the heels come up, especially if you just did a big squat or a lot of volume on squat, your hip flexors may be tight and stuff like that. So you relax a little bit and the heel comes up. And so then you'll get called for that. But to you, it may feel like, hey, my foot's flat. Like I feel like my shoe is flat. But what the referees see is that your heel is up. And so for some of my lifters in person, whenever I see them, like I'll literally come with my hand and stick my fingers underneath that part of their shoe and be like, listen, I have my fingers underneath your shoe, like your feet aren't down. And then maybe sometimes they feel that and can actively then push down. So you have to focus on driving that foot and the shoe completely down, or maybe potentially having to move it a little bit further so you have the mobility to do that, so that you don't get called for it. And then here again, just making sure being consistent with the pauses. So that one was quick. So if we watch that again, so she comes down and then it kind of like starts tilting to the right, and then she starts pressing. So you're never going to get that quick of a pause in a meet, especially because when you are benching yourself and you are reacting to yourself, like, okay, I'm paused, I'm going to press now, it's going to be faster. And some people will actually start pressing. Like it looks like that left side already started pressing like as soon as she started her chest, because she was already thinking about going. So if you just watch this left side, like there, she was already starting to go. In a competition, they're going to wait until that bar completely comes down, it stops, then they react and say press, and then you have to react and then start pressing. So it's going to be quite a bit longer than that. So again, you want to be consistent and honest with yourself with your pauses. So that one was quick. That one was a little bit better. That one was quick. That one was a little bit better. So it's like 2 and 4 were better pauses, and 1 and 3 were basically touch and go. So if I kind of go back to like this one, that one basically, just down and up. Like she didn't slam it on the chest or anything like that, but just went up right away. So again, when you are training by yourself, you have a coach there with you or someone to give you a press command, then you have to be honest with yourself. Maybe you watch the video, and after you watch the video, you're like, oh, those pauses were a little bit quick. And then on your next set, to pause longer. And then if you do have someone there, a training partner or whatever like that, even if they're not a referee, they can learn, they can watch and see, okay, the bar is now motionless, give the press command. So you can practice one, someone's keeping you honest, and then practice listening to someone and reacting to them saying the press command, especially in the weeks leading up to the competition, like the last 3 or 4 weeks. Have someone give you a press command, at least on a top set if you're doing a single or a double or whatever like that, If not, do it on the back off sets as well. And you can even tell them, hey, just bias towards being longer. Like be sure the bar is motionless and then give me the press command. And you can always practice like on a warm up weight too. So that like, they don't freak out that it's going to be, 95%. You may feel the lift and it's dependent on how fast they give you the press command. You can practice on 80%, 85%, 90%, and then they'll be comfortable at 95%. So that you are honest with yourself, because the vast majority of people are going to be weak from off the chest to like a couple inches off the chest. That is the most difficult part. So if you're making that the easier for yourself by either not pausing long enough or just doing a quick touch and go and then trying to estimate that to a max or like that, it's not going to transfer as well. So just because the lockout's fast doesn't mean that you're going to get off the chest with a heavier weight or a longer pause. So you want to make sure that you're keeping that part difficult for yourself, especially for people who have the wider grip, like a max grip. It's going to be all or nothing off of the 2 inches off of the chest. The lockout's going to be easy. If you have a very narrow grip or you're very like tricep dominated and stuff like that, then you may have more of a difficulty with lockout and be fine off the chest. But most people, it's going to be right off the chest. So you want to make sure you're being honest with yourself. Let's take a look at this other angle. So nothing too bad here on this angle. You can tell again about this elbow being tucked in more, this one being flared out more, this shoulder being up towards the ears more, this one being pulled down more, and the bar being tilted. But it's not too big of a deal. It's not the end of the world. I would say the more important thing is making sure the pauses are long enough and being consistent with the pauses, and then making sure that the feet are flat on the ground, not being called for that. And then maybe trying to improve this over time, maybe doing certain tests to see, if you do some kind of stretch for your front delts or for your pec, whatever like that, seeing if one side is tighter than the other one and maybe you need to work on that one, or if they're both the same, and just see if you can make small improvements or just make sure it doesn't get worse. But from this angle, not too big of a deal. And let's take a look at the deadlift. Similar thing, again, you can see that horizontal travel. So here, I'm gonna go back a little bit more. So here the bar, right where this state of Ohio is right there. And then as she pulls, you can see how much it moved horizontally to here. So this distance right here, she needs to see if it's because the bar's over the toes and moving back to the midfoot, or if it's starting at the midfoot and her hips are just shooting up and the shin angle is moving too much and the weight in the bar moving back, and she has to just focus on a tighter starting position and not having the hips shoot up. But it could potentially just be sitting down with the hips a little bit too much, pushing the bar forward with the knees and the shins, and then the body's compensating, getting back over to the middle of the foot with the shoulders directly above the bar before the pull initiates. So potentially she might need to look into that starting position rather than this starting position. So that right there, and then pulling the bar into the shins, pulling the shoulder blades down, contracting the lats, and then the lockout. It's pretty easy there. And if I pull Cindy's numbers real quick, since she just competed at the Arnold and she was doing our position of power app. So what she had told us is that the squat is the one that really shot up. So here you can see before she was doing 137, 140, missed the 145 in both those meets. And then she was running our programming and she hit the 150 here. And actually the body weight was down a little bit from the Virginia Pro into the Arnold. So her body weight went down a little bit and then the squat went up 10 kilos. And you can clearly see that in the videos, how the squat is looking good and it's improved from before, as far as taking the time between the reps, making sure that the elbows are staying in position, the bar is staying in position, the knees are staying out, depth is looking good. And then here you can see for the bench, the bench has kind of been stagnant. So 105 here, again, 105 missed 110, here 105 missed 110. So it could be a couple different things here, but it could be like some of those things that I said, being inconsistent with the pauses and not pausing long enough. So maybe you do a quick pause on a 105 as your heaviest single in the gym and you're like, oh, I'm capable of 110. But then you go to the competition, you get a much longer pause in the 105 and it's going to be much more difficult. So we'd have to watch the videos of the attempts to see how it went. So here, potentially, it could just be 105 was her max, or maybe 107.5 was her max, but the estimates from the gym were just off from those quicker presses. And then potentially just continuing over time to improve those little things, like I said, making sure the heels are down, making sure, you're not getting too asymmetrical, and then just putting in more volume in the bench press. The bench press can really handle more volume than the squat and especially the deadlift. So continue to build that up. And then here, the deadlift's been a little bit stagnant as well. 190 here, then got to 192, and then just missed the 195 here. So potentially she had 192 in this meet as well. We'd have to see the attempts, and see what the issue is. But the deadlift wasn't too much of an issue in the videos, just that starting position, continuing to improve it, and continue to improve how tight you are, pulling the slack out. So a couple things there to work on as far as bench and deadlift, but also the total is still progressing. So, it's going to be difficult to hit a PR in every single lift, every single time. But the first thing you want to focus on, obviously, is the total. So here went up 5 kilos from 2020 to 2021. And then from the Precision Power programming, from whenever she started until March, hit a 7.5 kilo jump there, thanks to the squat. So at least the total is increasing. It may increased a little bit faster right here. And then if she can just continue to focus a little bit on the bench and the deadlift, get some PRs there, or match the PRs as far as the deadlift here, then can build up the total some more. So let's see who else we got. I was just seeing if we had anything else from Cindy, but we will jump over now into Vantac. So let's go back up and see what we got. So Vantac said he's jumping back into powerlifting, and he actually ran a different program here, 9-week TSA beginner program. So he said he didn't get the results he had gotten in the past, which makes sense for a couple of reasons. One, if you run the same program over and over again, especially if there's less things that the program could change. Like if you're just running a new 1-rep max, but you're running the same sets, reps, and accessory work, then you're going to have a diminishing return. So you're going to have less and less of an effect from it. So that's why you have to focus on changing things up. As far as like for us, we're really focused on slowly building up more volume over time. But also you can look into, fixing technical things with different variations, or if you have to like put on body weight, then you can focus on maybe some more bodybuilding work, that kind of stuff, to make some changes to continue to improve. And then here, also the cut can affect things, because now if you're in a caloric deficit, it can affect recovery, it can affect the amount of muscle mass you have, and so then that can affect the effectiveness of the program. But even then, as I mentioned to him, even though he didn't get the results from that he had gotten in the past, what I was telling him here is that adding 30 pounds to his total while dropping 8.5 pounds of body weight is really good progress, because some people may maintain their body weight and not put 30 pounds on their total in this amount of time. So here you can see end of November 21 to end of January 2022, because it's a 9-week program. So some people may do a 9-week program maintaining body weight or gaining weight and not put 30 pounds on their total. So he was able to drop the body weight and be able to improve. So really good there. And 20 pounds of it came from the squat, 5 from the bench and the deadlift. Usually the bench is the one that's most affected by body weight, and then squat and the deadlift. But for whatever reason here, the squat got a nice boost, the deadlift a little bit less. It could be just because the squat's a little bit weaker. So you can see how it was 295 and the bench was 255. So quite close there. And then the deadlift was much higher at 425. So now here afterwards, you can see, click on this, make it a little bit bigger. Now you can see how the squat has gone up and separated more from the bench. So 315, the 260, and then now it's a little bit more even with the deadlift at 430. So it could just be that the squat was lacking a little bit. And so doing a good program with enough volume boosted up that squat quite a bit. So let's take a look at the videos real quick as well. So really good squat there for him. Maybe even had a little bit more than him. So here, really good job of taking a big breath, bracing the abs down, get everything tight, and then descending with the hips and knees together. Really good position here as he goes down, goes clearly below parallel here, extra deep, and then comes up here. Really good position as far as maintaining the torso angle, not having the hip shoot up or anything, fighting through that little sticking point, and then powering up through lockout. So really solid squat here. Maybe if he wants to, he can work on not going as deep. You can see this knee kind of collapse in a little bit as he's going really deep. So here it's in a good position, and then there you can see how it kind of comes in. So eventually you kind of hit like the end range of motion of his mobility and kind of like bottomed out, and that kind of forced the knee in. So potentially just stopping himself a little bit short. Maybe I'll be able to maintain a better position. And then the other thing is just like here it looks like the toes are kind of up. So as he's squatting too, as he's coming up, he starts pushing down there a little bit, but then the weight kind of shifts back to the heels and they start coming up here a little bit again. So it's just focusing on maintaining the full surface area of your foot, pushing down into the ground, big toe, little toe, and the heels, and not having it shift where shifting the weight to the heels and the toes come up, or shifting the weight up to the toes and the heels come up. But these are very minor things, really solid there as far as a squat and as far as a max attempt squat. So we'll go into the bench next. Let's watch that one more time. So really solid there as far as a bench as well. The pause was quick because you can see, if I go back here, you can see how the bar was like still sinking in the chest. So if you just focus here as the bar is coming down, the bar is like still sinking into his chest, and then he goes to press. So here, bar still sinking, and then he goes. So let me play that again. So you can't like see a clear stop. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, just for like as a competitive powerlifter, is like he locks it out and goes right into the rack. So you just want to be focusing on, especially if you're going to compete, to lock out completely, wait a second, and then rack it, so that you don't do that in a competition, jump the rack command, and then miss it. But really good positioning here again as far as squeezing the shoulder blades. Really want to focus on pulling that chest up as high as possible. Good position here with the feet, driving the legs. Good position as far as grip width, tucking the elbows, everything like that. You want to try and maintain this right here. If you pause right here, trying to hold that position and not continue to sink in like that into the chest. And then as far as the press, does a good job of pressing back towards the shoulders, flaring the elbows out a little bit, maintaining the arch and the leg drive, and then locking out. So again, really solid bench press there. Just a couple of little minor things to focus on. And let's take a look at the deadlift next. Really solid on the deadlift as well. Let me watch that one more time. A couple things maybe to work on. So a couple things that I see, small things. One, as he's pulling, and I'll show you in a second, as the bar is like going up the shins, is the bar kind of like swings off a little bit of the legs and kind of comes back into contact with the legs. And then the other thing, similar to the squat, is a little bit of the weight shifting. So again, the weight kind of shifts back onto the heels and the toes come up. So here, let's look at the bar path first, and the bar being in contact with the legs the entire time, which is what we want. So here he goes to initiate the pull, and you can see the bars in contact with the legs, good position. And then there, you can see how that right here, it's separated a little bit. So his shins kind of like shifted back a little bit. And then here he pulls the bar back in. Now it's in contact with the legs again. And then as far as the feet here, you can see it looks like he's got full contact here, driving the toes. And then here, as he's going past the knees and going to lock out, you can see how the toes start coming up. And you can see how he almost losing his balance basically back here at this point, and then drives him back down. So this is what you want to be careful of, especially with a max weight or whatever. If you just happen to push a little bit too far back on the heels and the toes come up, then that weight can also push you back, and then you stumble and you lose the rep. So you, again, you want to be focusing on maintaining that balance. You want to be driving your feet into the ground, maintain that bar of the midfoot, trying to keep your weight of your body also of your midfoot, so you don't want to be shifting too far forward and you don't want to be shifting too far back. And then you want to just, again, be pushing down here and focusing on that balance and all the way through, and not shifting the weight back onto the heels to try and like lean back to lock out. You want to be just locking out by bringing the hips through, rather than trying to shift your weight back and lean back to kind of get the weight back and then get the shoulders back. And then just as far as the starting position, again, for a lot of people, it's difficult to find a good starting position, but you just want to make sure the bar is over the middle of the foot, making sure the bar is in contact with the legs. And so there, potentially just pushed a little bit forward. So here could have been a good position. And then there, just pushed a little bit forward. And then the shins kind of move back and kind of threw them out of position. So again, it's just about having the bar over the middle of the foot, having it in contact with the legs, not having the hips shoot up. And then from there, think about pulling the bar a little bit into the shins. So you want to try to, with the arms, pull the bar into the shins a little bit. That's going to help pull the shoulders down and contract the lats and keep that bar on the legs and not have it drift away. But again, overall, really solid deadlift. Just some minor things to focus on there. See who we got next on our list. So let's check out Ayuma. So it might just be that one right there. So let's take a look at this deadlift. I responded to him as far as he did 5 reps. He was asking for his RP 7.5. And I was letting him know right here, you know, good starting position, your hips stay in place well, spine stays neutral, and it did look like RP 7.5 to me. So let's take a look at it right here so you guys can kind of see what I'm looking at. So you can see really solid set here, really taking his time between the reps to reset, make sure the spine is neutral and everything like that. So if we kind of go back here to the beginning, you can see how he's trying to set his back properly, make sure he's in a good starting position, and then drops his hips right there. And then here, as he goes to pull, you can see how everything kind of moving up together, shifting back a little bit, but everything's kind of coming up together. So it's not like the hips are shooting up and the torso angle is changing. Then here, he takes his time to reset, get in a good starting position here. Again, here you can see how everything's kind of coming up together. A little bit less shifting back, so a little bit better than the other one. But even with the little bit of shifting back, you know, the feet are staying flat, driving the toes into the ground, not coming up with the toes. Here again, resetting. Good starting position there again. Again, some people like having the head up like that. Again, if there's no pain, no issues, the spine's pretty neutral right here. Not a big problem. And so overall, really solid set. Really good job taking the time, making sure getting the same solid starting position each time. So a little bit of the hips going up there as he's starting to fatigue, but not a big deal. And I believe this is the last rep. And that move really solid as well. So as far as like the RPE, one way I kind of think about it as far as like RP8 is the RP8, this something around where your opener should be, because it's like a 3-rep max. And so your opener is going to be somewhere around there, like 88 to 92%, something around a 3-rep max. And so something around the RP8. So what you can do is like you can go watch a video from one of your competitions of your first attempt in a competition where you made all 3 squats or all 3 bench or deadlift. Don't take one where you missed your third, because that potentially means you open up too heavy on the first and second. But if you made all 3 of your attempts, go look at that first attempt and see the speed at first attempt. And that's kind of the speed that you want for an RP8 for the last rep. You want that same kind of speed. For a lot of people, there's not going to be very little or no slowdown. So here, it looked like, no slowdown. It looked a little bit faster than the opener for that last rep. So that's why I agree with him on it being a RP 7.5. So you can see no real slowdown there. And so definitely 2 more reps in him, maybe 3 more reps in him. RP7 for him, maybe a little bit faster, maybe like, something like your last warm up in a competition. And so that's kind of a gauge that you can do, is like RP8 should be something that moves similar to your first attempt. RP9 should be something that moves similar to your second attempt. So you can always go look at a competition and look at the video and then watch a set of 5 or 3 or 1, wherever like that. Watch that last rep and see whether it's the same speed to kind of get consistent with how you're rating your RPs. And I think that's the only one. Oh, we got this one down here as well. 155 for 3, RPE 7.5. So let's take a look at this one. So again, really solid set here. A little bit of the hips tucking underneath him because there's a heavier weight. So if we kind of look right here, he's setting everything properly. And then as he goes to pull on this one, a little bit more rounding here. And then we go into the second rep. And then you can kind of see here how the hips like start tucking underneath him. So like if this is your hips, they're kind of tilting. And so here it's like tilting counterclockwise and tucking underneath him because the body's trying to get the glutes like in a better angle and closer to the bar because the weight's too difficult in that position, being further away from the bar as far as the horizontal distance. So let me see if I can draw on here real quick. So the hips are trying to like turn like that and get closer because you have this distance from the bar to the hip joint. And then the body's trying to naturally close this distance because the further away it is, the more difficult it's going to be. So as the weight gets heavier and it's too heavy for these muscles, the hips are trying to tuck under and get closer to try and be able to use those muscles in a more effective position as far as being the distance here away from the bar. So let's keep going with these reps real quick. So then he goes into this final one, I believe, right here. And then again, you can see right there a little bit tucking under, and you can see again now we got a little bit more of a rounded position. So just something to be mindful of is really focusing again on that bracing and trying to figure out the position of the back and the hips and keep that in position as you initiating the pull and not having it tuck underneath you and the back start rounding. And then the other thing could be just strengthening those muscles around the hips. Also, it's hard to tell, but it looks like maybe he is someone who has a longer torso compared to his legs. And so it's going to make this position here longer. And that's why it may seem like he's like shifting his weight more forward here and maybe a little bit more rounding because the torso is a little bit longer. And so potentially you can also test out sumo deadlift to be able to get the legs out wider, drive the knees out, and get these hips closer to the bar, torso a little bit more upright to kind of shorten that horizontal distance. So instead of being really long here in horizontal, he can get more of an upright position on sumo and shorten that distance a little bit, get the hips a little bit closer, and maybe have a little bit less rounding in the back. But just depends on whether, I don't remember if you've submitted a video, Yuma, or not, whether he's tried to make that change before and whether he feels comfortable with sumo, if there's other issues with the sumo, like hip mobility, ability to drive the knees out, those kinds of things. So if he has to stick with conventional and it's just being mindful of the starting position, not letting it deteriorate with more reps or more weight, and then continuing to strengthen those muscles around those hips so that they don't tuck under and round over the back. We are on number 5, Critical J. So let's go up and find his videos. So we got a couple there. I think those are the ones. So let's take a look. I've added a hinge before every rep, and I think it makes a huge difference on my speed off the ground. Anything more I should work on. So let's take a look. So a couple things here that he can work on. One, and I believe when I had the sound on, you can hear it, is you can hear him yanking or jerking on the bar a little bit. So again, it just comes down to really pulling that slack out of the bar, keeping everything tight, making sure that bar is as high as possible in the sleeve, and then initiating the pull rather than being relaxed and yanking it and you hear that clicking sound because you're just yanking the bar and there's no tension. And then the other thing is just constantly focusing on getting in a better starting position and figuring out how to get the spine neutral. So here, before he initiates the pull, you can see the spine looks really neutral, the head position looks good, everything like that. And then as he goes and yanks on the bar, initiates the pull, then you can see he's getting a little bit more rounded over. On this first rep is not that bad. And then we go into the next one. And now during his setup, he's not getting as neutral of a spine than he was for the first rep. So now starting in a little bit worse of a position. And then when he goes to yank, now we can see a little bit more rounding here. Then we go into rep number 3. Again, never gets the back straight before he initiates the pull, and a little bit of rounding here. And so then the rest of the set is basically, rounding the mid back and going into the lower back. And so this could be dangerous. Especially a lot of people get, the herniated disc in that L5, S1 region down there. And that's what you have to be careful of. One thing you can try to do and practice, which I used to do because I used to have this issue too, where I'd, not be able to get my back ever straight before I initiate the pull. And then my back would round and I'd crank my head back, thinking cranking my head back will get my back straight, but it wouldn't. Is one, at first I lowered the weight. Second, I ditched the belt. And third, I tried to focus on getting in a good starting position with the back straight and the head down before I even started the pull. So I spent time down there. If it took me 10 seconds, 15 seconds, really try and focus on how can I feel, pulling my chest up or pulling my shoulders down or pulling my butt up or whatever, how I can do to feel movement in my back. Okay, does this feel straight? Does this feel rounded? And my head position, pulling the head down, looking down to the ground rather than cranking the head up. A lot of people crank their head up. And again, like I said, potentially get stress on their neck, but then they feel just because their head is up that their back is straight. But if you bring your head more neutral, it can be easier to feel your back and feel the positioning of your body rather than when you're cranking your head up. Just if you try and think about like walking or doing anything with your head cranked up, it can be hard to feel the movement of your body and how you're positioning in space. So ditching the belt at first, especially if you're just focusing on warm-ups first, try and just do your warm-ups without the belt, head down, perfectly straight back. If you can't even do that with let's say 50% of this weight, then you need to work on that first. You need to first work on how to get in the proper position without a stress or too big of a stress here. So with 25%, 35%, 50% of your weight of your max, then you should be able to get in a perfect position. And then if the position deteriorates as you're getting higher RPEs, then that makes sense because it's more difficult and it's more stressful. But if you can't even get into a proper position with very low RPEs, then that's what you need to focus on first. Sometimes the belt can be restrictive of positioning, and so it can be forcing you to a bad position. That's what I'm saying. First, ditch the belt, learn how to move your body through space in a good position without the belt, with lighter weights, and then you can focus on adding in the belt or going to heavier weights. And then again, just really focusing on that starting position, not yanking in the bar, making sure your back is actually straight before you initiate the pull. You have tension in that bar, everything is tight, you're not sitting down too much, and then initiate your pull. Now, you may always have a slight little bit around your back. Like, it doesn't need to be perfectly straight. It doesn't need to be hyperextended. Everyone's going to have a little bit of different variability. People who have, shorter torsos and maybe better built for deadlifts, these really long arms, may still have a little bit of rounding in their back, but they'll maintain. So if it's rounded a little bit, they'll maintain that the whole time rather than starting straight and rounding, or being a little bit round and continue to round more and more as the pull goes to range of motion, or as you load more weight. You don't want to be changing the position of your spine during load. You want to be maintaining a rigid, whether it is neutral or slightly flexed or slightly extended. If you're maintaining that throughout the entire range of motion, then that's going to be better than starting neutral and rounding over, or being rounded and rounding over more and more and more. So maybe you want to take a step back for a couple sessions, drop the weight, drop the belt, and just focus on warm-up weights and see if you can get into a good starting position, get the bar as tight as possible, pull that slack out, and then do your reps and see if you can maintain that for a set of 3. Take a break, come back and do a set of 3, keep the reps lower and more sets to just kind of practice that starting position rather than doing like a set of 8 or 10 and then just getting sloppy as the reps go along. All right, let's take a look at the squats. Week 7 heavy triples. So my form could have broken down a bit. Let's take a look at the squats. So it looks pretty solid. Couple things to work on here. Really solid as far as the unrack and the walkout. And then he does a good job here. Right there, takes a kind of a breath and gets everything tight, pulls down the bar. And then the descent here looks good, nice and deep. Here as he goes up, the knees come in a little bit right there. So again, not the end of the world, but just something to be mindful of and focus on is trying to drive those knees out as hard as possible the entire time and fighting that urge of them trying to collapse. And here it looks like the left one doesn't collapse as much as the right one. So that could potentially, lead to some twisting or turning and stuff like that as well. So really focusing on driving those knees out as much as possible and maintaining them out to really be able to engage the hips and maintain that. The other thing here, it's hard to tell, but at lockout, it looks like maybe he's kind of like a little soft on the knees and bouncing. So you just want to make sure that you're locking out the knees completely so that when all your joints are locked out, that load is resting on the bones and the joints, and your bones are really strong and good at compression. Versus if you leave the joint a little bit soft, now your muscles have to work to maintain that position. So it doesn't want to, bend more, and it doesn't want to straighten more. So your muscles are having to work to maintain that position. So you're actually wasting energy. And then also, if you're going to be in a competition, you have to lock out your knees at the beginning and the end. So you don't want to have a bad habit of that. Good job like resetting there. And then here again, good depth, good job keeping the elbows in position, everything like that. And then again, the knees coming in. And I think it's that third one where the bar kind of moves up a little bit on his back. So it looks like potentially here he's in a good position. And then there, the elbows kind of shoot up a little bit. And then the elbows shoot up a little bit. And so the bar may have, again, went forward on him. So again, you can kind of see this too with the plates kind of turning forward, is that momentum, especially in that one right there, is pushing those weights forward. So let's take a look at this one again real quick. So you can see how the elbows go up and then the bar potentially rolls forward again, up a little bit. So when you're in this position, you really want to focus on keeping the elbows in this position static and pulling down the bar and fighting that urge to have the elbows shoot up, because when you shoot the elbows up, then that messes a little bit with your shoulder and lat tightness, and also it just rolls the bar forward. So you want to keep it down to keep the shoulders and the lats in position, and then be able to pull that bar down and keep it in position. So yeah, it was a difficult set for you here. It's basically RP 9.5 or 10, call it, just to fight through. And so the form did break down a little bit. So especially with the lighter weights or lower RPs, really focus on driving those knees out, keeping those elbows in place, and pulling that bar down your back, and making sure you're maintaining that throughout the range of motion and throughout the set. So we got Connor next. And so if I go up here to Connor, he says he's getting ready for junior nationals. I want to make sure his form is dialed in. Is depth being hit, or am I just a pinch high? 555. And so Jason actually responded here to him already here in text, saying that the squats are high and that he needs to get, the hip crease below the top of the knee. So let's take a look at it real quick as well. So just to add on as well to what Jason said, one thing what you can do, Connor, or anyone who's watching this when you're filming, is if possible, is raise that camera up a little bit. So if you're filming from weird angles, like from this ground view up, it can be difficult, it can be difficult to see the hip crease compared to the top of the knee. Or if you're filming a really far back angle, then it can sometimes look higher. Or if you're filming like a really front angle, like a chief referee, sometimes it can be difficult to see the hip crease kind of drop in, especially depending on the size of the lifter, how big their quads are and stuff like that. So the more we can get to a side view and then get the camera up to about knee level, or even a little bit above knee level, then it can be a little bit easier to have a straight shot and be able to see, okay, here's the knee and here's the hip crease, rather than having this bottom up view and then we're trying to gauge our perspective here. And then obviously the better quality videos and better lighting and shadows and stuff like that, like these lights, are a little bit overexposed and kind of throws us off. It's hard to see exactly where the hip crease is. But if we kind of go back here, so if we just take that as the bottom position, looks like a pretty solid bottom position. So what I'm seeing is for the top of the knee, I like to come usually from behind the knee. So this crease from the behind the knee oftentimes will lead you right to the kneecap. So if you just go on your own knee right now and you kind of go from the back of your knee up, you'll see it kind of goes to your kneecap, like pretty close to the center of your kneecap. So then from there, you can focus on going up a little bit more to get the top of the knee. So here you go to, where the kneecap is going to be, and then the top of the knee might be somewhere like that right there. So that's the way I kind of use it and look at it, where some people try and some people think like the top of the knee sleeve maybe, or some people think maybe like they're looking at their top of their quad, and you can see how much different these positions are as far as the base for the top of the knee, because people are trying to be maybe biased towards themselves and pick a higher position. But this is what we want to be focusing on right here. And then we'll come across. And so this is also where you want to make sure your camera is level and stuff like that. So that when we're drawing a line, the line is going to be level as well. So let's take that right there. And then for the hip crease, it's going to be somewhere right in here. Again, like with the quality of this video and the lighting, it's going to be a little bit difficult. But again, some people, maybe multiply people will be like, oh, I'm down here, I'm below parallel. Or some people will take the center of the the hips like that, or maybe the hip socket or whatever, and be like, oh, I'm below. But really what we want to focus on is somewhere right around here. And you want to be mindful also that it's actually like the crease of your hip and not just creases in your shorts that make it look deeper. So it's going to be somewhere, and I'll go a little bit easier on to somewhere around here maybe. So if we went lower, if we want to go deeper in the crease, let's say we'll take there, and then I think maybe it's actually there. And if we want to be more conservative, we'll say somewhere there. But you can see with all of these are all higher than that line. So in this case, he needs to continue to go down with the hips and get deeper. And so depending on how much also range of motion he has in the ankles and stuff, the knees may not go forward anymore. And so at this point, he just needs to continue to sit down with his butt, go down and get down deep enough. And again, this perspective may be thrown off a little bit because we're kind of like looking up at it. So maybe if the camera was raised, this distance wouldn't look as far. So it's hard to tell whether this is like, 1 inch difference, 2 inch difference, 6 inch difference, and he needs to go down, but clearly he needs to go lower. So when we watch it again in real time, like here, you can kind of see, the hip crease is going to be somewhere there. So if we go back a little bit, the hip crease is going to be somewhere there. Somewhere right around here where it kind of meets with the belt. And then there you can see how it cuts it short. Like he kind of feels like the hips kind of lock up a little bit. And then the knees kind of come in a little bit as well, and he cuts it short. So another thing you can do if you get different angles is compare how low these plates go compared to the safeties or the bar, though that can also be a little deceptive if you lean over more. But here you can tell he has to lower these safeties maybe like, let's say 2 spots, and then focus on getting kind of like similar where he's getting close to the bottom of the safeties, and then he knows he's going to be deep enough. So it's good that he asked, because this was like I would say it's called RPE 10, because it really struggles right there to fight through and lock it out. So I'm not sure if he can do more. So what happens with some people is, okay, you did 555, RPE 10 I call it, but some people will lock out fast and think they have more in them. So if we just look at how fast he locks out, he fights through there, and then lockout's easier. And they might say, okay, I got 565 in competition, but you're not factoring in the most difficult portion of the lift, and you're not factoring in that you're not deep enough. So he may need to sink it, let's say 2 to 3 inches deeper, or like Jason said, 4 to 8 inches deeper, let's say, and then be able to come through that difficult part with it. So he may need to drop this a lot. Maybe he needs to drop it to 30 pounds off, 40 pounds off, maybe even 10%, cut off 55 pounds. Maybe you go down to 500, see if you can sink in 500 of depth and be able to stand up with it, and then go from there. Depending on how well the 500 moves, okay, then you go up to like 510 the next week. See if you can sink that to depth, making sure you video it. And to practice it more potentially, might be a little bit close to the competition at this point. But just as an example for people that can take away from this is doing multiple singles. A lot of people want to work up to a really heavy single, just one single, and then drop down and do 3s, 4s, and 5s. But what you can do is you can work up not to quite as heavy a single, but do 2 singles, 3 singles, 4 singles. And so you could do, let's say, 3 singles at 500. You do your first single, you film it, you watch, pause it, see if it's the depth or not. Then you can adjust your second single from there. Say, hey, I need to go lower, or hey, depth looks good, or hey, depth looks good and the weight's easy, so I'll go up 5 or 10 pounds, or oh, it's high and the weight's difficult, so I need to go back 5 or 10 pounds and make an adjustment. Then you do the second single, film it, again, watch it, and adjust. And that way you get more practice, and then you can also adjust along the way based on how it's going. Versus if you just do one single at 555 and it's high, then you're like, well, I did my one single, it's high, I can't change it now. It was RP 10, I can't change it now. And so then you're committed and you're done with the workout. Versus if you went to RP 8 and did 3 singles, then you can make sure you adjust based on how your depth is on each single. And if you want, you can adjust a little bit up or down. If it's RP, you're supposed to be RP 8 and it feels like RP 7 or 7.5 and depth is good, you go up a little bit weight. If it's RP 8.5 or 9, then you go down a little bit of weight. And you can make adjustments there by pulling down the RPE or the intensity a little bit and focusing on more practice. Because in the competition, you want to just be ready for that competition with good practice, competition standards. So you want to practice in the gym, multiple singles and really hone that in. And if you're doing, let's say, 3 singles at RP 8 and your depth is good, then you get an idea of, okay, my opener is going to be somewhere around here. And so then that will prepare you for the competition. So hopefully Connor can figure that out, get his depth down, and be ready to go for junior nasts. And it looks like our last one is going to be Nebula. Again, a depth issue right here. So if we just scroll back up here, right here, he has his 365 RP7. Again, this is like a weird angle. Like I said, if you're really far back here, it's hard to get this horizontal view of depth. So now our perspective is a little bit off, because if you just try and mark, okay, your knee is going to be, top of your knee is going to be somewhere here, then it's like, well, how do we draw this line? If we draw this line horizontally to our two-dimensional image, it may not be correct. Okay, so it may be a little bit angled this way, depending on if we came to the side view, how it looked, and also whether the camera was straight or whether it was angled a little bit different. So your perspective could be a little bit thrown off. But if we look at it like this as a direct horizontal picture, then his hip crease looks to be somewhere right there. So it looks a little bit high. And also some of this could just be for some people, if they're wearing shorts and if they have like a pocket on their shorts, that can also make the hip crease look higher. The hip crease will actually be under there, versus if you're wearing a singlet that is going to be form-fitting, a little bit compressive, then it's going to stick to your skin and your body better, and it's going to show your hip crease a little bit better. That's why you want to try and get more of this side view rather than getting this behind the view. And you'll see some referees sit back here too, and some, I don't know how they do it, because oftentimes everything looks high, and they may be calling things high. That's why people try and get more of the side view or bias more to the front. Like a lot of international IPF referees will bias a little bit more to the front, because the spotters will tend to be further back, so the spotters won't block your view as much from this front view. The spotters may block your view from this behind view, and they're still trying to get as close to, being on the side as possible to still see and not be behind where, the butt and the back and stuff may be biasing the depth, and then the spotters might be blocking the view. And then if we go into this one right here, so this one is, he says 315, stretching and trying to go as low as possible. Again, this is a weird angle, but if we kind of look at the top of the knee, might be somewhere there. And so again, if this is how perspective throws off, if we draw like a horizontal line, like that's a horizontal line on our 2D image. But really, we should be drawing our line something like, maybe even something like that. So maybe something like that. It's really difficult to draw it out, but something like that, and then the hip creases, somewhere around there. Something in this general area. But when you look at just the image by itself, it looks much deeper than the other one, and it looks like he's below parallel. If we got a direct side view, it would probably look much better. Potentially some tilting here where one side's deeper than the other one, so potentially has some hip issues going on here. And so Nabil was also mentioning here that, squat really depends on his flexibility of his hip flexors that day, and he'll stretch them for 30 minutes. It doesn't seem to help. And then he's saying he could, literally couldn't go any deeper. And I was asking about his stance, and he says that he's pretty wide now. Now higher lets me hit parallel and sometimes depth, but yeah, it depends on the day. Not sure if hip impingement. So yeah, it could be something like a hip impingement for some people, where depending on how their hip socket is built, with certain stances, you basically lock up and impinge. And at that point, then the lower back just rounds and the hip tucks underneath you, because the ball can't move in the socket anymore. So then that's when you have to maybe try out different stances. So maybe you go into a wider stance, you point your toes out, really drive your knees out, and then the ball can move in the socket better. So just something to look into. And in those cases, maybe with a very narrow stance where it locks up and then you round over, no matter how much you stretch, especially the hip flexor and stuff like that, it's not going to stop from that bone on bone hitting each other. So one way you can do is just trial and error, try out different stances, try a very narrow stance, see how low you can go. Try a moderate stance, see how low you can go. Try a very wide stance, see how low you can go. Maybe test out like the toe angle as well. And another thing is, if you went to someone who's more of a professional, I don't know if it'd be like a physical therapist or a chiropractor, maybe something like that. Maybe they can do different tests on you to see, if you just like lay down on their bench or like that, what kind of range of motion you have in each hip as far as internal rotation, external rotation, whether one side's more than the other one, and testing out those things and seeing or feeling whether there's any kind of impingement. So they may be able to test that and be like, okay, you're locking up in this position, you need to make these kind of adjustments. Or they may be saying, okay, you're lacking external rotation on left side, but not on the right side. And maybe you have to work on that. So things that you can look into if you have access to those kinds of people and those resources. There may be some things you can do on your own. Like if you just like YouTube search it, like internal, external rotation, then you may be able to find some things. So let me see if it kind of like pull something up real quick. If you just went to YouTube. And just did like external rotation of hip test. So you could maybe look into this hip internal and external rotation test and maybe be able to do some of the stuff on your own to see if there's a big difference on one side compared to the other one and see if there's anything that you can potentially work on. You can also like test your hip flexors potentially by just doing like a Bulgarian split squat. So if you just went into a Bulgarian split squat and held it and held one side and saw the tightness or how it felt, and then go to the other side and hold in the bottom position and see if whether one hip flexor feels tighter than the other one. You can also do like a pigeon stretch, which hits, you know, the external rotator muscles and hits that like glute medius, and see again, does one side feel way tighter than the other one, or they feel similar? And there's different things like that that you can do to see if there's any kind of like asymmetrical issues from one side to the other one, to see if maybe there are potentially some stretches that you can work on. Or you can do the test to see if you just have, you know, impingement or more limited range of motion on one side versus the other side. And then if you can find some kind of expert, then you can maybe check in with that expert and see what kind of tests they can do and what kind of things they can see as far as making adjustments to stance width, toe angle, that kind of stuff. So I think that covers all the videos and all the peoples. Yeah, I think that covers it. Vaniori was going to throw in stuff late, but you know, we're already over an hour in here and I went through 7 people, so we can always save him for later. And again, just to reiterate as I finish this up, let me switch over my camera view, is again, if you want to get in on this, you can join our Discord server. So again, if you're on YouTube, the link is in the description. I also threw it in the chat over on Twitch. Or if you ever go to Instagram, you can check my Instagram bio or the King Lift's Instagram bio, and the link is there for whenever you want to join. When you join, I'll hop back over here real quick. When you join, you won't be able to see this stuff. You have to go over to the welcome and the rules first and read through all our rules and guidelines here. And then you hit the thumbs up reaction button right here, and that makes you a member to be able to see everything else in chat. So that way we keep out, you know, our bots and spam and all that kind of stuff like that. So that'll give you access to the rest of the stuff. Then you can come over to the form check here, drop your videos, whether you want to look at technique, whether you want to look at RPE, and just chat with us. If you have any questions about programming, especially about our Position of Power app, you can ask here. As far as like people here ask, you know, what to do if they missed out on time and that kind of stuff. And if you want to talk about King Lift stuff, about podcasts and everything like that, like we have the latest episode here doing the recap of the Arnold and a little bit of recap of Italian Nationals, you can always hop in here, let us know what you think. We discuss things, tell us your ideas for future episodes or future games, like we're going to do the Fantasy League again. So that's the way to join and get in on the action if that's what you want to do. And that's about it. So I'm going to end it right there. Thank you all for coming. Again, you have a list now of all the 7 people I went over. So if you're one of those people, you can always jump ahead in the stream if you're watching after the fact to look at just your videos being broken down. All right. Hopefully you're all having a good day, and I'll catch you guys on the next live stream. Bye.